Hello, in this video we'll be reviewing secure zero-footprint host access. My name is Q Mangus, I'm a product marketing manager. We are joined today by Scott Vitkus, a senior systems engineer, and Barbara Ballard, a senior product manager. To begin, Barbara will review a little bit about secure zero-footprint host access, and then Scott will be giving us a demo. Barbara, go right ahead.
Hello, I'm Barbara Ballard, Senior Product Manager at Micro Focus. Today, we're going to talk about one of our new solutions at Micro Focus, demonstrating the way to securely access the host. It's called Host Access for the Cloud. Before we look at the demonstration, I'd like to talk a little bit about the drivers for change and the initiatives that I see happening in mainframe organizations. Top of mind for everybody, whether you have a mainframe or not, is security, right? But it's even more impactful when you think about it in the window or the lens of a mainframe organization. So that's really what we're going to drill down on. So first of all, from a security point of view, you think about the breaches that are happening today, and gosh, there's just plenty of them, right? Every time you open up a magazine or the internet, that's all you hear about is another breach that's happened, right? And it looks like nobody's safe. And frankly, nobody is, right? So we certainly have to learn how to make sure that anybody getting to our sensitive data or our IP is who we know they are, and they've proven themselves, right? That is one of the security fundamentals, is knowing who's accessing your systems, making them prove it with strong identity, and then authorizing only the individuals that actually have a legitimate need to access that information. And this is even more important when you're thinking about a mainframe organization, right? Because when you have a mainframe in your organization, oftentimes these things are thought about in silos. They're thought about in the enterprise, where you might have a database or an application facing the internet. And then the mainframe is taken into a different consideration. And rarely do you have consistency across the enterprise. That's really why we're going to introduce this solution I'm about to talk about. Before we get into that demo, though, let's talk about a couple of other drivers for change, or the initiatives that I hear when I have customer conversations. First of all, everybody's looking for saving money, right? And money is not always in dollar value. It can also be in savings of resources. For example, when you can make it to where only one person does something instead of two people, you have a cost savings there, or resources involved in doing something, even the training to teach somebody how to do something. So all of that involves cost savings. And then I think today we're all on this road to modernization, right? Modernization for me, in the conversations that I have, comes up in a couple of different ways. First of all, mainframe organization, right? We think about that in a green screen type of application, but lots of customers want to make sure that they're presenting that mainframe application to their end users in a modern way. And certainly that's important to the end users. The other thing is, when you think about an application in itself, you think about a desktop application, right? Installed in Windows. But today, more and more customers are moving to a web-based interface, right? They want mainframe access to look like all the other apps that they have in their environment, and those are all web apps, right? One of the other things about modernization that you want to think about is the cloud, right? So we have been enterprise on-prem for so many years, but one way of thinking about modernization is that move to the cloud. And how do you do that? And what part does terminal emulation think about that? So those are the things that kind of come up for me when I have conversations with customers. And frankly, they are why we created the product that we're about to demonstrate. So we created a product called Host Access for the Cloud. We chose the name carefully. So I know, lots of people think the cloud, host access for the cloud. This is not accessing the cloud. This is terminal emulation from the cloud. It doesn't have to be from the cloud. It can also be from your on-prem, but it is cloud ready. So that's important. It is zero footprint web access to your host application. So what that means is it's browser-based, HTML5. Why is that important? Because up until now, the web-based access usually requires Java or ActiveX. This is HTML5 right there in your modern browser of choice, right? So that's really important. The other thing that's really important is it's centrally managed. So that means centrally configured, right? So I can create my sessions and I can deploy them based on on who needs what and when, and I do it all as the administrator. They don't have to do anything. It's not installed on the desktop. So that's really important. And frankly, by the way, it's even more important in the security realm that we're living in, because security without management isn't security. I've got to be able to flip that switch. I've got to be able to block that user. I've got to be able to make that change to configuration. Great example of that is when we moved to TLS 1.2. How long did that take? Okay, we can't take that same path when we go to TLS 1.3. We've got to be able to make that change, and we've got to be able to make it fast. Speaking of security, right, all of the data protection that you're used to in a terminal emulator is here in Host Access for the Cloud. We get it. Got to be SSH TLS technologies, no doubt. And then here's what I believe is our secret sauce, is the ability to tap in to your IAM. Active Directory and LDAP are great examples. What does that mean? That means when your end users connect to get their session, they authenticate via your corporate IAM credentials. It could be SAML, it could be your Active Directory username and password, but it's yours, it's in your environment, it's already set up, and so you're being able to authenticate them via your existing resources. And then maybe more so importantly is you dole out the authorization. Does this person really need to access the mainframe? Because they should be blocked unless they do. And once they are authorized, then only then do you give them access to that green screen behind the scenes. Okay, let's take a look at the product in itself. So again, this is really secure zero footprint access. Secure because there shouldn't be anything but security in the timeframes we're living in, right? No one should ever connect to a host via telnet. It should always be in a protected, encrypted environment. And zero footprint means nothing at the desktop. And then obviously your host access, whether that be an AS400, a Unix, mainframe, Unisys, even some airlines, global distribution systems that we provide access to. So looking at this diagram, you have your clients out there on the left-hand side, your emulators, if you will, right? Nothing installed on the desktop, but these are your browsers that are running on maybe a laptop or a Chromebook or it could be a desktop, it could be an iOS, it could be an iPad or an iPhone. So these are modern browsers running on any of those. They connect to what we call the host access for the cloud session server, and they connect to that via HTML, and that is what renders the green screen down to their device. But that's not done until we've checked. Does that user, how are they provisioned? So we check in, we use a product called Management and Security Server that's included with Host Access for the Cloud, and that is the guard at the door, if you will. They're the ones that check the identity using your IAM. So is this who they say they are? And then, are they authorized to get a mainframe session? And if indeed they are, that is the first time that we will render that screen down to that device. We're connected securely on the back end via TLS or SSH, whichever makes sense on that connection. So when you think about this from a security perspective, because of making sure that only legitimate users actually connect and get a session, and by the way, they've proven their identity, the other thing you think about is the management concepts that go along with security, applying patches. So I don't know about you, but applying patches at the desktop can be time consuming. It can almost be overwhelming, right? Especially in the world we're living in where so many patches are coming out. Well, with Host Access for the Cloud, you apply those patches at the server. You never touch that endpoint. So once on the server, then the end user devices, because there's nothing installed on them, are automatically protected because the patch is at the server. So just another thought when we're talking about security. Okay, I think it's time for a demo. Let's turn it over to Scott Vitkus. Take it away, Scott.
Hi, I'm Scott Vitkus, Senior Systems Engineer with Micro Focus, and today we're going to be reviewing Host Access for the Cloud.
Now that you have HA Cloud installed, what now? So what we're going to do is use the MSS Administrative Console to configure host access for your users. First thing we have to do is log on to the admin console using the password that you used during the install. When you take a look at it, you're brought into the Manage Sessions pane. And this is where you can add sessions or session configurations that you want to distribute to your users or make available to your users. But first thing we're going to do is configure authorization. What we're going to do is allow authorization and access to our sessions using Active Directory. What I can do is click on my configure settings, go down to authorization and authentication, and select the LDAP tab. Now I've pre-configured an LDAP here, and we can just take a look and see what it looks like. We simply need to provide the DNS or IP address of the Active Directory server. In this case, I'm using Windows Active Directory. Provide a server that can read those attributes from the Active Directory and provide my search path for how I'm going to traverse the Active Directory to look for my users that are trying to access my sessions. Once I've provide that information, I can go ahead and do a test connection, and if I get a success, all is done correctly. So I'm going to use this setting. So I check this box, my configured LDAP, and hit apply. So now it's going to require all users who access HA Cloud to authenticate prior to being shown any sessions that they can launch. I can use this method to allow all users that can access the sessions, or if I want to limit what users can actually see individual sessions from my Active Directory. But for this demo, we're just going to use all of the users that will be can authenticate can see my published session. So if I go back to manage sessions now, I can go ahead and add a session, and I'm going to add the host access for the cloud session. I'm going to call it Dallas. This is our host, internal host that we can connect to. And then once I hit launch, get prompted to select the host type that I want to configure. In this case, we're going to use the IBM 3270. Hit next, and then I'm presented with the connection configuration. And I provide the IP or DNS of the host that we want to connect to. In this case, dallas.attachmate.com. I'm going to use the open port 623 that's available for Open Telnet. And then I can also see different characteristics or protocols that I may want to use, TN3270, TN3270E, similar to what an emulator configuration would be. Other things that we can change are colors, mappings that you would want to distribute to your users, macros that you would want to use as administrative macros for startup, connection or disconnect, give the ability to file transfer, copy-paste behavior, printing, if you want to add an associated print session with this session, and then user preferences. These are the rules that I want to users apply their settings. So they would be able to customize their display settings, maybe any color mapping. I would allow them to create any custom keyboard mappings that they'd want, and maybe control some file transfer if they need. And when I save this, I will be able to connect to a session. If you notice down here, status bar, that I'm connected. I'm ready to type in. Again, this is a administrative session. I can verify that I'm connected. I can go ahead and hit exit. And then what I want to do after, as an administrator, I created the session, I want to assign access. By default, I said all users will have access to this. And I simply need to check that box next to the session name that I want. And now any user that authenticates against my host access for the cloud server will be able to see and launch that session. So I can go ahead and apply, and it says my mappings were updated. And if you notice, I have no security sessions, and it's reminding me that I'm connected to this host on the open port. So now if I switch over to the host access for the cloud URL, this is the domain that I'm in. I'm going to provide my credentials. Once I log in, I'm going to see that session that's available to me. And once I click on that session, as a user, I'm going to see the same session that the administrator had created. I want to create individual preferences for how I like to interact with the session. So I may want to change my background color. My host green, now I want to display that as blue. And maybe I'll change my cursor to crosshair because I have trouble seeing where the blinking box is. So if I save this, I'm going to see my cursor now show up as a crosshair, and it'll be my display will be default now with a cursor blinking and in the crosshair. So I have a definitive idea where my cursor is when I'm typing. And then as well as I changed the background green color to blue now. So these are my preferences. So I'm going to go ahead and disconnect as a user, and I'll log off. So now I just got word from my system administrator that they're no longer going to allow Open Telnet to my host system, and they're shutting off that port 623, and they're going to require me to use SSL. So what I can do as an administrator, I can dynamically create this setting change so it can be available for all users who access this new Dallas session on a secure port. Now to do that, what I have to do is apply that host certificate to my MSS. This is going to be the certificate that's going to be the SSL certificate used by all of the clients that connect to it. The administrator supplied me the certificate. So what I need to do is go into Administrative Console again, into the configure setting under trusted certificates. And I'm going to look for these terminal emulator client certificates that I want to use. So I'm going to click the upload and navigate to where I save that file on my local PC. And I'm going to upload that certificate. And then I'm going to give it a name that I know what it is. This name is just something that will be show up in the list, so I know as an administrator what it's associated with. So in this case, Micro Focus host, and then here's the certificate definition. So once I've applied the certificate now, I can go back to my managed session and then launch the session again. It's still retaining the same IP address, but in this case, I want to change to the new TLS 1.2 port that the system administrator requires for TLS protocol. And then in my security, I'm going to go ahead and select the TLS 1.2 protocol. Now, if I save this, I'm establishing a connection again, but the only difference now is I see this plus sign down in the OIA area, and that indicates that I do now have a secure connection. So if I go ahead and exit this, I've saved this, and if I go and I can tell that it's secure now, it's changed my port to 823, so I know the port has changed, but it also indicates that this is now a TLS encrypted connection to the host. And to verify that as a user, I can come back to my HA Cloud and log in again as me. If I'm a user, I select the Dallas host that I want to connect, save my color preferences and my crosshair preferences, but now it indicates that I am now connected using the secure port. Making changes to a host session are pretty easy and manageable with the host access to the cloud and using MSS. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott, for that demo, and thanks, Barbara, for the information. And thank you to all of those who have viewed this video. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Our contact information is there on the screen. Also, feel free to visit us at microfocus.com to learn more about host access for the cloud. Thank you.